Hello everyone and welcome back to another dev stream summary for this week's dev live stream. So the news they have for us is, of course, the Saw chapter is out, and they said they are not touching balance right now. They are getting feedback first before making any balance changes, and the feedback they are talking about specifically is a survey on the new chapter that will be going out in about a week or so, maybe a little more, because they want to give people time to adjust to the new killer and her playstyle and get used to her before getting feedback. They also have said that they are enforcing disconnect bans as a reminder to anyone who consistently disconnects. In fact, there have been many people that have been banned for DCing already, and some of these DCers have reached a 1-week ban already, meaning they have already been banned 2 times previously before this third 1-week ban. So these people who are DCing from 40% or more of their games. So just remember, do not DC from games or else you will get banned. The Emblem public test build does not have a date set yet, but they will keep us updated on when that is coming out. It is coming. And just as a reminder, the Emblem system is the system that will be reworking how you get scored during a match and how you get your pips. This will be both for killer and survivors. Next, they talk about the top bugs. So, a big bug right now is the nurse blink, swipe, and stun. This is when the nurse blinks, she goes through her entire missed hit or blood wipe animation before receiving the blink stun. And it's a bug that really affects her playstyle because she can't go back into the chase right away after blink hitting someone. There's also an issue with blink hits not counting for achievements and dailies. And then they have also already fixed the dead hard bug where people could dead hard through reverse bear traps. It's just not out on console yet, but that will be coming with the bug fix patch. Then there is a huntress bug that is not listed on here. And this bug is she gets a big slowdown when canceling a hatchet throw. Next are the known issues. So you can see here we have crashes and freezes, hatch placement on new map, pallet numbers in preschool, sound occlusion, generator kick makes the pallet sound, and then hex totems can cast shadows on jigsaw boxes, I guess. Then they went into some bloody statistics, and these are the top 5 survivor perks, but instead of saying everyone and then rank 1s, they have everyone and then prestige 3 players that are level 50, because they thought this would give them more accurate stats. And as you can see, self-care is still number 1, sprint burst, and then it changes on the 3rd stat between borrowed time, decisive strike, and then for everyone it's urban invasion, and prestige players is iron will. Next are the top 5 killer perks in these categories. For everyone, you can see it's Ruin, Barbecue, Nurse's Calling, Iron Grasp, and Noed. And then for prestige players, we have Barbecue and Chili, Hex Ruin, Nurse's Calling, Brutal Strength, and Enduring. So that's the fun fact of the week about Dead by Daylight players. Let's move on to the more interesting part of the stream. Their level designer, Matt Walker, came in to help clarify some of the changes with pallets, as well as talking about how they go about finding answers to these problems. So it was basically a map balance panel, or a pallet panel. And he goes into a lot of detail and explains it really well, so I'm just gonna include it in the video here so you guys can see for yourself, because he can explain it better than I can.
So this is a top-down of the Grim Pantry map. So the green dots are the procedural pallets. That's what we call the pallets that may or may not spawn depending on our procedural generation rules.
I'll take a leap here and I'll say the blue ones are the ones that are gonna be there.
The blue ones are gonna be there. Yeah, that's how it works. They're what we call generic pallets, which means they don't plug into the overall pallet system.
And the red one?
So the red one is a procedural pallet which did not spawn. I want to get into a little bit more details of how we arrived to these kind of situations get in more in depth into it. But let's look at what happens after the patch. Did you see that?
I barely noticed.
You barely noticed. That's exactly the goal. So we're trying to have really well dispersed pallets, so that you don't have huge clumps of them like we used to with obviously the double pallet tiles and stuff like that. So you won't see huge changes. In this case, the red dot on the left was excluded from the spawning, by the procedural rules due to a maximum and minimum count, right? Okay, so what that means is the map will have found 20 or whatever the maximum at the time was, number of pallets to spawn, and anything above that number will not spawn. So if you can go to the before again, it basically means it spawned every single pallet it could except for number 21 or, you know, however many, the
18,
red one.
18.
Right, well, the whole thing is that we didn't have the ability to go map by map. So anyway, so the point is that in this case, the red one was deemed to be the one that was too many and didn't spawn. However, you can see on the right side, those two green dots, which one of them turns red in the after image, so we can switch back now.
There you go.
That one will have been blocked now, not necessarily by the minimum or maximum numbers of pallets that can spawn, but rather by its proximity to another pallet. Okay, so this all sounds a bit weird. Let's just keep this here, and I'll explain exactly what we did. So prior to this patch, what we had was a minimum and maximum number of pallets, and that number was defined for all maps, across all maps. So every map shared the same amount of minimum and maximum number of pallets that can spawn. Obviously, for some maps, you need a different number of pallets that can spawn than other maps, right? So this was a pretty apparent to us. In fact, this change that we've submitted with the DLC should have, in fact, been submitted with the last DLC. However, we didn't have time to iron out the kinks with the system. So now, in fact, we have access, or we have a system that allows us to define minimum and maximums per map. What that means is we can tweak the values to get just the right amount of pallets for that particular map, taking into consideration all the unique aspects and so on of the map. So, what does that mean? It means that we'll be able to dial in the right numbers and balance the maps in terms of pallet numbers fairly easy as of now. Okay. So the minimum number of pallets is the biggest effect we've had on the pallets, right? So if you can imagine a map that had a minimum of 10 pallets, it means that no matter what happens, 10 pallets must absolutely spawn. In some maps, for example, like Coal Tower, smaller maps like that, if you force 10 pallets to be spawned, it's going to be way too many pallets for the size of map, etc., right? So this was our major problem. Every map was sharing, I believe it was a 10 or 15 pallet minimum, thus serving some maps which absolutely needed those extra pallets, but making some maps, in some cases, utterly broken, right? Utterly unfair for the killers. Too many pallets. So what happens now is we define minimums that suit the map in particular, and we ensure that we don't have a overzealous spawning of pallets. It's pretty much that simple.
All right.
So the minimum number was the most important value that we changed over previous iterations of the pallet spawning system. The second thing we changed, and many people commented on the kind of the fact that it was such a small number, but we changed the minimum radius that a pallet can spawn next to another pallet by 2 meters. So the radius was 8 meters and it changed to 10 meters. That doesn't sound like a really huge number, but when you consider a radius, 2 meters is actually a 4 meter diameter change and roughly 110 square meters of surface area change. So it actually does make a big difference on paper. And as you can see for the second red dot up there in the in the map. Well, it didn't spawn because it was too close, because it's a double pallet tile. So I'm gonna try and get through this really quickly though.
You've already failed.
I know. Well, they want to know, so I'm trying to bring as much information. The whole point is that the minimum will make sure we don't cram too many pallets into a map. Now the maximum will make sure we cram pallets into a map if we need it. So I wanted to talk about the disparity of pallets in some sections of the map. You can see that there's some missing dots. We call these dead zones, where there's just nothing. There's just nothing.
Yep.
You better be hiding in those areas, because essentially there's nothing that can save you. This is one configuration of tiles for one map. It very well may have turned out differently, where many more tiles with pallets had spawned, therefore giving us much more selection to choose from on which pallets we should choose. And if we don't set a maximum, then it's basically going to spawn everything that is not within our minimum distance, which means that it would just explode, and you'd have some versions of a map which would have way too many pallets still, but it will never have not enough pallets. So this is the thing we fixed. Maps should never have not enough pallets. By changing the maximum, we can ensure that we never have too much. And so with the minimum maximums, we should be able to dial in the precise numbers that we need. Okay, that's one thing. Pallet distribution, etc. counts. Pallet count is not the only important thing, however. As many people have noted, pallet quality is also something we must consider when we're spreading them around, right? Bjorn, next slide, please. Oh, that's a pallet, son. Thought you might like that. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a classic tile. You guys might recognize it. I don't know what name you might have given it, but the official name is LD01. Very sexy name.
It stands for?
Light Density, LD01.
Because it's the first one.
It's the first one. And when we talk about density, we talk about visual blocker density.
Yeah.
So this is one of the categorizations we have for our tiles. Okay, moving along. What we're doing now is looking at the quality of the pallet. So by analyzing the loops that surround a pallet, we can give it a kind of quality rating. So we can just go to the next slide. I think this is the one. Yes. So this is an analysis, or it's an example of how we're analyzing the pallet loops associated to certain pallets.
So
Now,
the yellow line is
the
the
path.
shortest possible loop around.
Not
this.
necessarily. This was done with a navmesh tool just to generate it really quickly, because otherwise it's a bit of a complicated task. But as you can see in the this is the good part, the nomenclature. LD01 P1B, that loop,
Yeah.
which is 23.5 meters long. You can see a little kink there, a little dent. That's a little concave
Oh yeah,
part.
so it doesn't really.
You wouldn't
count.
go in
Yeah.
there. You would go straight. So
Fair
obviously we have to be careful. We're not just using any old numbers. But the idea is that this week, me and Horvath working together, we're able to look at the problem and have a really good idea of what size in meters that a loop should be in order for it to be mechanically viable for mind gaming.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about line of sight blockers yet. That's going to be on the next level. That's going to be a next layer of considerations that we do when we analyze the pallet loops. But right now, what we're looking at is to aim for roughly a 20-meter loop. We've looked at it, and mechanically, this is just about the right size for mind gaming. Not too serious of a threat for the survivors, and just enough of an opportunity for the killers. And we like that number. Now, what happens? Some of them are going to be a little bit lower. Some of them are going to be a little bit higher. And we have an acceptable range there, somewhere between 15 and 25, depending on the line of sight blockers and so on. So, what are we doing? We're basically going to go in and we're going to tweak the size of the pallet loops to fit our kind of desirable metrics, right? Now, a lot of people have been, pretty much talking about this. These are things that we should be doing. This is something we've been wanting to do for a while. We do have a list. We have a hierarchy of importance, if you will, on all the subjects that we will eventually get to and fix. So just wanted you guys to know. So we are looking into pallet loop lengths, and we're going to be tweaking those to fit our ideal of a mind gameable pallet loop. So your feedback will be super important on this. All right, next slide. In addition to fixing existing pallet loops, I'm also adding pallets to tiles that didn't previously have pallets. Not every tile will have a pallet, mind you, but I want to increase the probability of us spawning tiles that actually have pallets.
Yeah.
Due to the way that our system works, we can't predicate the spawning of tiles on the existence of pallets in the tile. So this is our way of doing it. And I think it's going to work, in fact. So what this does is that it's going to ensure that we'll minimize the number of situations where we spawn dead zones everywhere.
Yeah.
But we don't want to over-control
all
it.
the pallets in the level are in the same corner, and then there's none elsewhere. It's going to be slightly better distributed.
Exactly. So we're adding some new pallets, and at the same time we're taking the opportunity to make sure that those loops are fun as hell to play. So that's another thing that we're doing to help fix the balance in the maps.
And then after that, he showed us some statistics of how lethal each map is. The percents you see here is the percent of survivors that die on each map, and I'm just going to cycle through all of these percentages. Keep in mind, this is for all ranks and probably all platforms as well. So that might skew some of the results because higher rank survivors obviously won't die as much as low rank survivors. Besides that, they just did the normal Q&A, which nothing significant was really asked or explained, so I'm going to skip over that as always. If you're interested in knowing what questions were asked, you can join my Discord, and I have a stream summary posted there with all the questions and answers they gave during the stream. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this video has been informative for you, and as always, good luck out there in the fog, and see you next time.